Through the magic of the internet, it is possible for me to respond to some things that were said by a Canadian psychologist by the name of Jordan Peterson, who teaches at the University of Toronto. I'm not going to be talking about the psychology he teaches or that he preaches, because that's not my area of expertise, just as it's clear that Marxism is not his. However, he has made statements about Marxism, despite not knowing very much about it, as is evident from what he says. These have included daring Marxists to debate with him, just for the record, anytime, anywhere, as long as we can work out the details, no problem at this end. So what is it that's wrong with what Mr. Peterson has to say about Marxism? Well, it's partly that he's recycling old Cold War stuff. The Cold War was over in 1989. Most of us have moved on around the world. Mr. Peterson seems to be stuck. And he's stuck with one of the oldest kinds of arguments imaginable, telling us that we should not be interested in Marxism. In fact, it's kind of immoral, in his words, to be interested in Marxism in view of what Stalin did in Soviet Russia. Well, okay, Stalin did terrible things in Soviet Russia. However, Marxism exists in every country on the face of the earth. It's been going on for 150 years, and a lot more than what happened in Russia under Stalin over a period of 15 or 20 years has to be taken into account if you're going to make an assessment of Marxism. To use the one example that is really horrible over there as the judgment on Marxism would be about the same sense as saying Christianity should be dismissed because of the Catholic Inquisition or the destruction of the Native American population by Christians, or the Holocaust against Jews, gays, and so forth by Christians in Germany, and on and on and on. 2 world wars by capitalist Christian countries fighting each other might all qualify for the kinds of argument Mr. Peterson makes. We don't make those kinds of arguments because they make no sense, and Mr. Peterson oughtn't to do that with Marxism. The only other thing to say is he seems to reduce Marxism, when he actually talks about it, to the problem of inequality, that some people are rich and others are poor, and he deals with that by the very sophisticated notion that poor people's anger at rich is their envy of the success. This is an insult to those folks who are critical of inequality, but apparently Mr. Peterson doesn't worry about that. So let's respond. Inequality is indeed a social problem, but it has nothing particularly to do with Marxism. People have been talking about the problem of inequality for thousands of years before there ever was a Karl Marx or a Marxism. The whole point of Marxism was to explain why inequality under capitalism didn't go away. And let's remind everybody, capitalism comes into the world in the French and American revolutions, talking about being better than feudalism, because under capitalism, you see, we are free, we are equal, we are democratic, and all the rest of it. Capitalism was to bring, in the words of the French Revolution, liberty, equality, and fraternity. Well, as you know, and I know, and even Mr. Peterson must know, we have capitalism, we sure do, but we don't have freedom, equality, and fraternity, not even close. Mr. Peterson's own speech is an indication of that. So the Marxists have always said, why is that? Why do we not have the equality that capitalism promised? And the answer is in the analysis of capitalism, the way in which capitalism organizes society with employers and employees, the kind of parallel to lords and serfs and masters and slaves, such that the employees produce the wealth that the capitalists get into their hands, thereby becoming wealthier, while the mass of the working people are excluded from the very surplus their creativity puts on this earth. In other words, there's an explanation. If Mr. Peterson understood that, his critique of capitalism might address that explanation. Instead, he acts as though there is no explanation, that Marxism is about the envy of the poor against the rich, with this caricature, with this straw man, which he knocks down with gusto. He thinks he's actually done something. For those who know something about Marxism, listening to him is embarrassing.